Listen, learn, and love, leading by example. That is our topic today.
Welcome to the Empowerment Zone with Ramona Houston, where we zone in on Black and Brown relations and our journey to empowering our communities.
And today our guest is Leedonal Jazzmin Dian Moore, who has led in all types of settings. Currently, Jazz leads as the chair of the Democrats Abroad Global Black Caucus. Today, Jazz and I are going to explore Jazz's life experiences that have influenced them to develop their concepts on leadership. Jazz is a Texas voter and lives in Germany. Jazz is fluent in German and English and decent in 8 other languages, including sign language. Jazz, throughout his life, has always been constantly relocating internationally due to growing up in a military household. And during his coming of age, Jazz learned early on the importance of staying open-minded, adapting fast to new and sometimes very stressful situations, and equally staying connected to Jazz's biracial heritage and upbringing. Jazz loves to travel, and Jazz loves to learn about different cultures. In addition, Jazz started early in investing their time and passion in strengthening marginalized communities, especially the African American and LGBTQI community. For much of Jazz's engagements, Jazz has received various national and international awards, including Miss Drag Queen of Switzerland 2008 title, European Tolerantia Award in 2016, which is an honorary medal for Jazz's outstanding work and activism in representing Americans living abroad. One thing Jazz has learned over their life is that the greatest power that we have as individuals is to listen, to trust in facts and science, invest in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and cast our votes and lead by example. I am quite happy to have Jazz here today to explore their concepts on leadership. Hi, welcome, Leedonal Jazzmin Dian Moore. What a beautiful name and a long name. What should I call you?
Thank you very much, Ramona, and thank you for having me. Well, you could call me Lee or Jazz, which is both a shorter version of it, and I am very comfortable with both names. Leedonal is my given name by birth, and Jazzmin Dian Moore is my artist name or my chosen name, because I do identify as non-binary and I go by the pronouns they, them. And there's still a lot of people out there that don't really get what people are and how they feel when they do say they feel or identify as being non-binary. And some people do have very harsh reactions about it if they get their pronouns wrong. I am very comfortable because I do feel very comfortable with both names. So however you feel is perfect for me.
Well, I like to refer to you from your preference. So what is your preference?
That's really funny. I don't have a preference.
Okay.
Most people say Jazz.
Okay.
I think that's kind of funky too.
Okay, let's go with Jazz then. So Jazz, I'm so happy you're here at the Empowerment Zone, and I'm really excited about the topic that you chose: listen, learn, and love, leading by example. So before we get to that important and valuable topic, especially these days, you hear me?
Absolutely.
First, tell our audience a little bit about you. You know, our audience likes to connect with our guests, and the way we connect is learning a little bit about their personal and professional backgrounds.
Mhm. Well, how much time do we got?
Exactly.
No, just kidding, just kidding. Well, I was born and raised, or I was born in Germany in Ramstein Air Base. Ramstein is also known by many people because it's the biggest military base outside of the U.S. And I come from a military family, so my dad is American. He's the military part of this whole, and my mom is the German part. I have dual citizenship, and because I grew up in this military household, we moved back and forth between the U.S. and Germany, or inside the countries, probably like every 1.5 and 2 years. And that was quite an experience, especially for me growing up, because I constantly was trying to adapt to new situations, finding new friends, hoping to be accepted in the new environment where I am at that moment. And it wasn't always easy. And as a kid, you do feel very uncomfortable. But I think at the end of the day, it made me who I am today. It made me very open. And it also broadened my horizon and seeing so many different countries and mentalities and traditions. But it wasn't very easy every time. I mean, as I said, I do have a German background. My German background goes all the way back to the, you can trace our lineage back to the 13th century. And I was able to trace my American lineage only back to where we had ancestors that were enslaved from Ghana, brought to Jamaica, from Jamaica, brought to Mississippi. And yeah, so I do get both sides of this whole history spectrum. So I grew up mainly in Germany and the US, but I never really felt at home in both states because I just grew up everywhere. So I'm more of a third country or third, they call it a global citizen in a way. I feel home everywhere. I feel home where I feel accepted and loved and listened to. So that's kind of interesting there. So growing up in all these countries, it really did broaden my horizon. Although I also was confronted with racism that went both ways. I mean, I could always remember moments, even when I was in the US, where my African American grandmother welcomed my Caucasian mother into her house with the words, sorry, but you're white, you can't come for dinner. So that was interesting. But on the other hand, if you go back to my German side, my grandfather, he was a full-blown Nazi. So he had his Hitler bust on his nightstand. And that is what I grew up with, because he literally told me into my face every morning when I was a little kid and was there for a visit, you're not worth anything, you're never going to be worth anything, and you're never going to be anything just because I'm Black. So I kind of grew up with both of those racism types. And it never blocked me. It never hindered me. It actually always empowered me to hear other people out, to listen to their stories, even if I don't agree with it. But it gives us so much information and knowledge in the small detail that we can all grow from it. And that's why I also think it is very important to share these personal stories, because that is just valuable resource that we all have. And I can see you're very shocked by telling you that I had a full-blown Nazi grandfather, and I get that reaction very, very often. But at the end of the day, as I said, he actually did empower me to become the best version of myself and the best example of myself, and actually to inspire other people to do greatness as well.
I am shocked. I don't know what I have so many things going on in my mind that I don't even know where to start. Because I'm like, okay, he's your father, right? So, and then
he's my grandfather. Yeah.
Your grandfather.
Yeah. He was a bit nicer at one point when he noticed that he had some benefits from my father being able to provide certain resources from the PX commissary. Then he was like, "Yeah, there's a new TV set coming out. I need that. Can you please?" Then it was like whatever. But he was also the president of a association called Burgfreundeverein. That you can translate that with Castle Association, which doesn't necessarily has anything to do with castles, even though I do have a nobility lineage there, but it actually is an association that upholds the old German traditions and values. And they go there with lederhosen and dildos. They meet every Sunday. They dance around the May tree. I was the only Black kid sitting there in the corner, just playing with my cousin, but nobody acknowledging me. Nobody of the grown-ups acknowledging me. So, yeah.
So I'm curious. I know this is kind of off, but you could educate us on this, like with your grandfather saying you'll never be anything or all of this. What was the relationship between you and your father, and then your father and your grandfather in handling you as a Black child? What?
That's a really good question, because my father, he was away very often, fighting wars for the US most of the time. But so when he was around, and he rarely visited my grandparents as well, or especially my grandfather, because they were divorced anyway. But when he was there, he always felt very uncomfortable. My grandfather, on the other hand, he was always trying to act very superior towards him. And as I mentioned, the reason why he let him into his house was because he knew that he has benefits through the commissary, through my father. I can remember there was one situation though, where my father actually did punch one of my grandfather's sons, so one of my uncles, or half uncles, because he said, he did a little translation error. So he said boy to me. And my dad corrected him and said, "Please do not call my son boy. He's a kid, but he's not a boy," because he wanted to educate him on where that word comes from, what it actually means, especially if you say that to a person of color. And he kind of was playing around with it because he got it. And then my father said it again: "Do not call my son boy." And the third time when he did it, he just punched him in his face. He never called me boy again. I remember that, but yeah.
And your mother and her relationship with her father and grandfather?
That was also completely destroyed and ruined, because my grandfather actually threw her out of the house when she opened up telling him that she's dating a Black guy from the military, and that she's pregnant. Because my German family background is very traditional, very conservative. So I also grew up very conservative, but I grew up also being partially raised by my grandmother, who was very strict, but she was a very respected lady. So she knew exactly what she's saying. She gave you guidelines, but she was a very open human being. And I remember, this is a bit of a different turn there. So when I came out to my mother when I was 16 as a LGBTIQ person, we visited my grandmother, and my mom was crying, and my grandmother was trying to educate her. And then my grandmother spoke to me in a separate room. She's like, "You know what? Let your mom cry. Let her educate herself. It's going to be fine. I'm going to tell you one thing." And as I said, she's like a really, really noble lady. And she turns around, she says, "Anybody has a problem with you, either the way that you look, the color of your skin, or what your sexuality is, just come to me and tell me, and I'll punch them in the face." And now I just want to enjoy my lunch. I was like, okay. It almost sounds like I have a very violent family, by the way, but it's not that violent. So that was very, very encouraging, knowing that her being a white person who only grew up in the US has so much foresight, especially, and oversight of the whole situation. It was completely contrary to how my grandfather was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So my mother, as I've mentioned, she was thrown out of the family at that time, but they never really had a really good relationship, and yeah. But things happen. Families can get messy. That's daily life. There is no perfect.
Yeah, there is no perfect. So looking at you stated that you were empowered by your upbringing. So how has it shaped who you are now, in terms of what you do now? Well, first tell our audience what you do, and then tell us how you feel that your life experience has empowered you to do that valuable work.
So that's a tiny question for a big answer, actually. So, and I do wear many hats. On one hand, I'm a diversity and equity and inclusion consultant for corporates, but also for embassies. I work closely with the American Embassy here in Switzerland as well on the Diversity and Inclusion Council. Besides that, I'm a TV and radio host, and I also organize events, plan events, and so on. Next to all of that in my daily life, I also am the newly appointed chair of the Global Black Caucus within Democrats Abroad. And I really feel like I am finally where I belong, where everything has probably led to all of my experiences, all of my challenges, all of my previous work that I did, empowering and encouraging others within the LGBTIQ community, or even our African American community living abroad. There's a certain magic in it when you understand that you're helping others to help them, and you're not helping others to help yourself. Some people might not really understand what it means, because a lot of people say, like, hey, you need to love yourself first before you know how to love others. Absolutely true. That is a completely different page in the book. But there's a phrase that I go by, because I also do a lot of charity work and a lot of different other tasks which are under the radar. But I go by the phrase, help others, but don't tell everybody about it. And yeah, it's just nice. I mean, sometimes when you work all your life for others and are there for others, you sometimes do get tired sometimes of just being there. But now and then you will get a beautiful surprise, which you cannot measure up in any value at all, because it is just unique. And sometimes you just get one of these sudden emails out of the blue, or a direct message, or even a phone call of maybe a very young person who heard a message, who read an article or an interview, or who saw the work that one has been doing, and it maybe saved their life. I've had plenty of these messages where I'm quite a tough cookie, and some people call me the ice queen as well. But those moments, they crack me. They're like, it's so touching and heartwarming. And going back to what I mentioned earlier is it is so important that we share our stories so that other people learn from it and they don't feel isolated. Because sometimes some of these stories can be quite similar in how people are going through certain issues. But at the end of the day, it's just sharing that knowledge and listening to each other. I mean, nowadays, especially also in the US, listening is I don't know if people still do listen. Do you think people listen?
No, it's funny. I just did a workshop yesterday for a social responsibility conference called the Be Civic Summit. And it was hosted by this leadership organization in Denver. And that was one of my recommendations in terms of advancing racial and social justice is we've got to listen. We're not listening anymore. And when we are listening, we're only listening, if we do listen, to people who totally agree with us. And that is not good for healthy relationships, nor is it good for a healthy society. And that's why, and moving on into your topic about listen, learn, and love, and leading by example, that's what we have to do more of, is leading by example through listening. And so I totally agree with you. No, we're not listening anymore, or listening very little.
Absolutely true. Because also, what you just said, listen, learn, and love. You also have to love what you do. It's there's this one, or there are a couple of studies out there that defines that 95% of all working people are unhappy with what they do. So their productivity is also limited very much. And one of our former ambassadors in Switzerland, her name is Susan Levine. She has been an outstanding, fabulous ambassador that we had. And we had some private dinners and meetings. And at one of our private dinners, she said to me, you know what? You're doing the right thing there. You need to lead by example. You always need to be the best version of yourself, to inspire others to do that as well. You can't always go to people and say, like, you need to do this. This is how it's done. No, you need to show them.
Yes.
So that they get used to it. They need to get used to the wording. They need to get used to the visual optics of it, and they need to see the outcome. So that's why leading by example is so important. And for me, the three basics are listening in, learning from what I've listened, and loving what I'm doing. Yeah.
With the topic that you want to explore today, leading by example, listen, learn, and love, we talked about listening and a little bit about learning. When you talk about you learn by listening, can you talk more about what learning and love means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, learning is actually a greater result also of what it means to listen. So if we accomplish and start listening to each other, there's a lot of information that sometimes is hidden on a very subconscious level, but also sometimes not that hidden. It's just not been told. And so there are many, many stories that we could listen to, for example, from our parents, from our grandparents, from writings which our ancestors have left behind, for example. That is a treasure trove of knowledge, and not just on a personal level with every individual story, but sometimes in those stories we learn a bit of our history as well. And this is something that intersects with every human being on this planet. It does not just need to be of an African American kind of topic. It could be any kind of topic where there's history, and the history is always hidden there. So that's why I also think it is very important for us to speak up. So on one point, I've referred earlier to say, listen, but it's also letting other people speak up, letting them tell their story so that we can listen from what they're telling us. I always, for me personally, I could be very adventurous, very out there, and very loud as well. But at the end of the day, I'm actually always the one in the room who takes a step back and just listen to what other people are talking, what they're feeling, what they're expressing. And I also think that there's a bit of empathy that is needed to listen as well, because there's one thing in just listening, and sometimes it can go into one ear and exit the other ear again. But actually, you have to fully understand what a human being is trying to convey or tell you. You also have to acknowledge the fact that empathy can sometimes be a door opener, a key to what this person actually is telling us. So empathy is a huge role player in listening.
Yes. Empathy does go along with listening. I totally agree with you. But can you, like, when we talk about leading by example, how do you think that many people who are in leadership roles are preventing the process of listening, by the way they lead. How, in other words, let's ask it another way. In other words, how can you talk about leading by example? How can leaders open the door for more listening? And how, and the other way, like I was stating before, how do they close the door to listening? So that we can understand as leaders how we can be more effective leaders and therefore be more empathetic with the people we work with and work for.
It's a really good question. And it's quite complex, actually, but it's, at the end of the day, really easy as well, in my personal opinion. So, for example, for me, what makes a good leader is that the person can listen to their team, because if you want to be a leader, you need to have a team around you, and you're only as strong as the weakest link. And you need to hear everybody out to figure out how to move forward, how to strengthen every individual part of that team. Here's a small example. I have a communities lead in my team who's quite young. He's very, very talented, has great degrees. And we came up with a marketing campaign, or I came up with one first, and I thought that was good. And I was up to date, à jour, with modern technology. But I chose him for a reason, because he exactly showed me his talent. So I gave him his tasks to do. And I looked at it and I was like, yeah, but I don't know if I really like it. And so I had 1, 2 things to say about it. And then he was like, well, listen, this is a very modern approach, what young generations want to see now. So why don't you keep that in mind, and let's just try it out. Let's give it a trial period for 3 months, and we'll just evaluate afterwards. And then we still could go doing it back the way that you're doing, which is a modern approach too, but in his eyes, already not a modern approach anymore. And so I sat back, listened to it, and I was like, actually, you're right. I did choose you because you bring the qualifications I needed to the table. Plus, you told me about what you're thinking, what I'm doing wrong. So I'm going to give you a chance. So I said, yes, absolutely, you're right. Let's go ahead with it. Let's do it. The interesting thing was, this is exactly now a week since he started the first new campaign in posting. There are positive reviews coming left, right, center to the max. So I called him up a day later. I was like, you're absolutely right. And I'm so grateful for you. And I just want to let you know you're absolutely on the right track. So sometimes you just have to let go of your own egocentric way of thinking, in a way, because it's not about yourself, it's about your whole team. And just have trust in their capabilities, because you chose the person for a reason. And that was a reminder for me again, and like, yes, they're absolutely capable. And if not, I'm here to clean it up, or to make it better, or just to do something different about it. So we'd have to listen and give our team members chances to shine.
I love that explanation for a variety of reasons. I always say, people sometimes confuse ego and confidence. And I believe that if you're going to be in any leadership position, no matter if it's at your church or if it's on a national, international stage, you have to have an ego, because you have to have enough confidence to believe in yourself and know that you can accomplish whatever the task or is at hand, or whatever the vision is for that particular organization or institution. And with that explanation of how can you be a leader who opens the door for listening, is that you stated you have to let go of your egocentric way of thinking, and leaders, sometimes it's hard because many times leaders, they're confident about their thoughts. They're confident about their ideas and in their goals. But you can be confident and at the same time, like you said, open the door for listening and trust your team. And that enhances your leadership ability, because then you're bringing out the best in others, right? And you're also not only bringing out the best in them, but no one has the monopoly on knowledge. So you're widening the scope of what you can accomplish as an organization, because you're bringing in the talent and the knowledge and the expertise of others around your team.
Exactly. And that's also quite a good point you're putting out there. I always speak about having a healthy portion of ego, because as you said, we do need a certain amount of ego to get things done. You just need it. It drives you. And you need to be able to cope with everything that comes around you, left, right, and center. But letting go and empowering everybody else actually does not just make your team stronger, it also makes you stronger. Because as I said in the beginning on, you're only as strong as your weakest link is. So why not go out, assist your weakest link, help them out, help them to become a very strong leader in their own area of expertise and field, because all of these certain team members, they make the whole team stronger and they make you stronger as well. So it is a win-win. It goes both ways.
How do you think by empowering your team, it makes you stronger as a leader?
It makes me stronger because I know I can trust them, because I can rely on them. And if because I'm just a human being as well, have a bad day or an off day, I exactly know that I can lean back or fall back on one of my team members or on the complete team. They will back me up. And this is something with the new team that I just now formed, and we've only been a new team since about 8 weeks now. I already had that moment and that confidence that they gave in me, that they completely told me, saying like, hey, listen, whatever happens, you know, we have your back. We trust you as well as you trust me. And that was a very beautiful moment to hear.
So tell us about your concept of love in leadership.
The concept in love and leadership it's quite simple, actually. You need to love what you're doing. You need to love having these conversations, even if they might get a bit tough sometimes, because conversations just are like that. You know, you can't always say amen to everything, and sometimes you have to say no to anything. You must not be afraid of saying no to somebody or to something. That is something that a lot of people do find very difficult to say or to write. Just a simple no. I grew up with a no, which is, let's go a little bit into the German side there, because no in German means nein. And a partner from me once told me that there's actually a way that you can change the nein, the no, into a positive yes. So nein, you could also use as noch ein Impuls notwendig, which translates into another impulse is needed for a yes. So constantly, repeatedly, do something that you like, do something that you love, and do it day and night. Yeah, just do it, literally. Just do it. But be confident about what you're doing, love what you do the research and educate yourself on what you're doing, and also never give up. Times can be quite difficult on a personal matter, on an educational matter, maybe sometimes in a financial matter. But at the end of the day, you just don't give up with what you love.
That's it. So now I know you're chair of the Global Black Caucus of Democrats Abroad. And I am sure that you take this idea of leading by example, listen, learn, and love to your leadership position there. So tell us about your work with the Global Black Caucus.
Well, the work with the Global Black Caucus is absolutely amazing and great, and it's an amazing opportunity for speaking out to African American citizens who are living abroad. So the Global Black Caucus is made up out of caucus members or Democrats Abroad members with from all ethnicities who are willing and are able to advocate on issues that are important to African Americans within the US and outside of the US. And we advocate on various issues, for example, anti-racism, Black Votes Matters, Black Lives Matters, environmental racism, climate change, human trafficking. We have a whole list which we advocate on. But what we mainly do is try and help to assist African American people living abroad to get access for them to get out the vote, which is quite surprisingly, if we want to talk about numbers, we have about 9 million Americans living abroad, of which 6.5 million are eligible to vote. And surprisingly, and this might shock you a little bit, only 8%, 7.5%, 8% of these 6.5 million cast their vote during the last elections.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. And people were engaged in this last election, and still it wasn't a lot engaged. Oh,
exactly. I mean, I do want to point out that the margin of victory of the Georgia Senate seat and so on came, and this is also proven fact, came from the votes from abroad.
Wow.
So that's why it is so important that we continue doing more advocacy. We've been doing a lot of outreach, newly outreach programs because we have country committees and they have Black caucuses as well. And some are new information. And so we divide everything up into 3 regions. We have the AAPI, which is the Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, the EMEA region, which is Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and then also the Americas. And we have the least amount of members in the Americas and, interestingly, in the AAPI region. We've had an increase of 2% now since I've been the new chair, which is small success, but good. Mm-hmm. And we're doing these grassroots outreaches, for example, with the Black Lives Matters associations in South Korea, Tokyo, and there was another surprising fact that came to light. So, for example, in Tokyo, they have over 20,000 members. And not all of them are African American, but the majority of them are. And so I spoke to them and I asked them, well, what do you think? Do you know if your people vote or cast their vote? And then she was like, well, they did discuss this once and almost nobody of them vote. Why? Because they don't have access to it. They don't know how it's done. They don't know where to go to. And I said, great, that's what we do. We want to help you file your ballot, to get your ballot, to make it possible for you to vote. And it's really, really easy. But some people just need help and access to it. And that's what we also do.
So for our listeners abroad, for those who are interested and for those that you've sparked their interest, can you tell them how they can become involved with the Global Black Caucus?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, you need to live abroad. You need to be an American citizen living abroad. And you could simply become a member. There's no membership fee whatsoever. If you go to the Republicans overseas, it's called, they charge an exorbitant amount of money just to become a member. And we don't do that. We assist every American out there who needs to get out the vote, and it's for free. So the best way is to visit our website, which is www.democratsabroad.org. And if you do www.democratsabroad.org/BC, that is our caucus website. And there you could simply press the button, become a member, and you get invites to various amounts of events that we host. There are great events that are coming up with diverse congressmen and women. Senators are planned very soon. Community building activities, movie screenings where we talk about the content of these movies and the filmmakers. For example, we had 2 really good ones very recently about The Long Shadow by Francis Causey, which is not just a movie for Black people, but it's a movie for white people especially. And everybody who was white in our membership, they were very surprised and shocked about the knowledge that that movie gave them to understand where actually institutionalized racism derives from, where it comes from, why it's so deeply rooted into our society and systems. Another movie that we showed recently and also spoke to the filmmaker was Mandela in Chicago. That we showed during Juneteenth because it depicts the correlation of the South African apartheid in correlation with the civil rights movement. And we also had filmmaker Professor Dr. Thompson Greenwell on the call. And again, so many people were surprised by the knowledge. Even I was very surprised because there were images that popped up, which I remember when I was not a teenager, but a little bit younger than a teenager. And I thought it was just art. I remember seeing these round medallions with the African state on it, continent on it, and the three colors on it. And I thought, yeah, it's art, it's movement. I didn't understand it back then because I was way too young. 30 years later, after watching that movie, I was like, oh, I get it. I now understand what the meaning of the symbol is. So that for me as well was a great eye opener. And also there, you never cease to learn. Every day is a great opportunity to come across new knowledge, work through it, and either implement it or utilize it or share it. Knowledge is out there on the street every single day. Yeah. So there are a lot of these programs that we do, and it's also a great way to also connect to African Americans all around the world and our allies too. So you don't need to be Black to be a member. Everybody's welcome.
Yep, I've always stated that it's so important to educate, connect with, and engage with allies as well, right? And that's why it's so important to have people that are not just Black in your organization. Like you just said, this is the Global Black Caucus, but you welcome everybody with the hopes that they will also be allies and advocates for you in the efforts, whether it be Black Lives Matter or voting or what have you. It's so important to develop multicultural relationships, partnerships, and allies.
And speaking of multicultural, so there's another great thing that the AAPI caucus leader and I thought about and are going to be doing in about 3 weeks. We are doing a caucus crossover. So what we're doing is the AAPI caucus and the GBC, the Global Black Caucus, we're teaming up and taking over each other's social media accounts to raise awareness on mutual issues.
I like that.
So what we're really doing is we set out a plan on what day we want to talk about which issue of our agenda so that we use the mutual issue, but we show it from a different perspective. Because there's a lot, just in this example, a lot of racism between African Americans and Asian Americans and vice versa. But we need each other. We're dependent of each other. And we need the numbers to secure a Democratic win during the midterm 2022 elections. So that is something that we just came up with it and we published it just yesterday. And we've already got tons and tons of positive reviews of like, that is something simple to do. Why don't we ever think of it? And it just works.
It's so innovative. You know, it's simple but innovative and a unique way to engage each other's communities and each other's issues.
Exactly.
And another way to be advocates for one another, right? Because you're using your platform to educate your audience about another person's or another community's, another group's issues.
And these issues are mutual. So some of these are very, very close to home and are not that far away as we think they are. I mean, if we also look at Stacey Abrams, she has been advocating on Asian Americans, people's rights for years. And a lot of people are not even aware of that. She's been doing this for years because this is a clever woman. She exactly knows we need to unite. We need the numbers to move forward. And when it comes down to advocacy, I think there's a basis or there are three types of advocacy. Self-advocacy in learning how to speak up for yourself.
Yes.
The individual advocacy in supporting people to exercise their rights. And the systemic advocacy or the system advocacy is focused on influencing and changing systems. And if you use all of these three, or if you look at them, you exactly know how to utilize them. These three types of advocacy as well, they actually are all also based on 5 simple principles: clarity of purpose, safeguard, confidentiality, equality and diversity, and empowerment, and putting people first. All of these are the principles of advocacy. All you need is good communication skills, analytical and research skills, a good judgment, creativity, logical thinking are some of the main qualities of a really, really good advocate. And if you have those broken down and looked at and evaluated with your own system and your own team, nothing can shake your advocacy plan.
And all of us need to embrace those 3 different roles of advocacy in the various spheres that, in our various spheres of influence and our various spheres of activity, I guess you can say, the places we go and then the things that we do.
Interestingly as well is that we do that anyway. All of us do that anyway, mostly subconsciously. But the magic and the power and the force comes when you change that unconscious advocacy into conscious advocacy. That's where the magic is, the power is.
That's it. Totally agree. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you too. I hope I didn't stumble too much here.
No, love everything you had to say. And thank you so much for joining us on the Empowerment Zone and just being a light in this world.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. This was a real pleasure. I hope I can come back again because this really is an enjoyable talk. And as you said, being a light, I mean, there's so many stories we all have to share and we all can share. And as I stated already earlier, all we need to do is be open about it and talk. It might not always be very comfortable for your own self, because some of these topics can come from a very dark place. They can be very sad. But at the end of the day, it can help another person grow out of maybe their own misery.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you on that. You stated that at the beginning of your interview, how important it is to share our own personal stories, even though they may be uncomfortable, because we can actually help others. And you stated, you have helped others by sharing your story, and you know that whether you, like you said, you don't always have to publicize it. But you're always welcome on the Empowerment Zone. Like I said, you've got so many, there's so many different things we can talk about. So the door is open whenever your schedule permits, or whenever you have that intuitive feeling that I have something that I feel like I need to say and to help others, please feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. And there's actually one question which I would like to ask your audience. And maybe this question is a question that your audience, I'm going to give your audience a homework.
Okay, that's it.
Have your audience ask this particular question to a friend, a family member, a stranger on the park bench, a teammate, and maybe even just the person working behind a grocery counter. How can I help?
That's it. And we're gonna put that out when we publish this to make sure that you get to engage on what the answers are. How can I help? That's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you.
But it's also great. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
But
Go
it's
ahead.
also great when people start doing that as well. It's like, I think it doesn't really depend on which religion you belong to, what your belief system is. But I personally believe that we were created in helping each other.
Yep.
That's our main purpose in this universe, to help each other.
Mm-hmm. I say that in one of my workshops on purpose, that whatever your purpose is in life, it is to help others. And for you, is so that you can live happy and fulfilled. A lot of people are not happy and fulfilled because they are not helping others and they're not engaged in work that brings them joy. And so, I totally agree with you on that your purpose in the world is to serve others in whatever capacity that is.
Yeah, absolutely. These are beautiful words. Well, not just words. These are meaning. There's so much strength in words. That's why it's always very important to be aware of what we express and what we express towards others, because words are sharper than a sword. And it's also, I think, a reason why listening can bring so much value, because when you listen, you take a step back actively to also think about what you're going to say it to empower your counterpart. See, we can go on for hours.
Words matter. Words matter.
Words matter.
Now we've reached our college strategies portion of our interview, and we would like you to tell those out there who are interested in attending college, what is your one strategy that you would give them for college success? But before you tell us that, can you tell us what college or colleges did you attend? What was your major or majors? And what was the degree? And then tell us that strategy, that piece of advice you would give students.
Okay. Well, to clear things out a little bit, I wasn't in a classic American college, because I visited American elementary school and high school, but then I switched over to a German school. While at the time I was living in Germany, and that was the wish of my parents. So the school systems are very much different. But there are comparisons. So the college that I went to, my majors were biology, chemistry, Latin, and English. My strategy there was to be proactive in everything I do, to not get distracted with my surroundings, to do the work and assignments that were given to me, also to question the work and assignments that was given to me, and also to enjoy it, to enjoy being in college, to enjoy my classmates, and just enjoy life, and keep everything in balance. Don't do anything too extreme. Don't just be behind your books, and don't be just doing some parties and things like that. Do everything with a healthy balance.
Love it. So those pieces of advice are: be proactive. Don't allow yourself to get distracted. Complete your assignments, of course. Question, interrogation, critical thinking is a part of the learning process. Enjoy life. Enjoy the process of matriculating through school, and make sure you are balanced. Thank you so much for that wonderful advice, Jazz. We appreciate it.
Thank you too.
Look forward to having you back on the Empowerment Zone.
Yay!
A special thank you to the incredible team of the Empowerment Zone. Terry Gully, theme song, NADWorks, digital support, and of course, our featured guest.
If you enjoyed my podcast, please subscribe. We are on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Be sure to rate us on Apple Podcasts too. Thank you for your continued support.